Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation entitled Improving Patient Experience in Virginia Hospitals and Health Systems. My name is Abraham Segrist and I'm the Vice President for Quality and Patient Safety at the Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association. And today's webinar is the fifth in a year-long series entitled 2020 Year of Patient Experience. Before we move into our presentation, I would like to review a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded. All participants are in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask questions or make comments, you can do that by typing into the questions box. Slides are available for download in the handout section of the webinar, and the slides and the recording, as well as an executive summary of today's presentation, will be posted on the VHHA Quality website about a week after today's presentation. And also, a brief feedback survey will launch at the conclusion of the webinar, and we certainly solicit your feedback regarding the presentation and how the association can continue to support your organization's patient experience improvement efforts. So today we're pleased to have with us our colleagues from Augusta Health in Fishersville, Virginia, and they will be our primary presenters today, focusing on rapid process improvement and patient experience. Following our colleagues at Augusta, our partner, Carrie Brady, will lead us through a few polling questions and discussions, and then we will plan to adjourn at the half-hour mark. So I won't review all of these slides. If you've been with us before, you're familiar with the vision and mission statement of the association. Here is a listing of all of the organizations across Virginia who comprise the Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association. So all of the acute specialty hospitals in Virginia are members of the association, and we encourage anyone that has a great patient experience story to share to reach out to us, and we would be glad to get you in the lineup for a future presentation. And just as a reminder, at the beginning of this year, Dr. Michael McDermott, the current chair of the VHHA Board of Directors, declared 2020 the year of patient experience. And on a side note, none of us knew then that COVID-19 would make another run for or be a competitor for the primary focus for this year. But our hospitals have made it clear while they need to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, continuing to focus on patient experience is a top priority. And so we're using these webinar series to identify and highlight efforts by Virginia hospitals to continue to integrate patient experience with quality and safety improvement efforts, to connect hospitals across Virginia. So if you hear or see something you like, we encourage you to reach out to the presenters after the meeting. And then, of course, our ultimate goal is to not only improve HCAHPS scores, but at the end of the day, to improve the experience that our friends and families have in our organizations across the Commonwealth. So today's objective is to discuss how one organization uses HCAHPS scores to guide their improvement strategies, to review their patient experience success sharing plan, and then to share insights from the impact of COVID-19 on deployment of key patient experience tactics. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Mary Mannix, the CEO of Augusta Health, and Crystal Farmer, the Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer. I believe they also have their colleague, Matt Fidler, their patient experience leader with them as well. So Mary and Crystal, Matt, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Abraham, and good afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about a topic that's really important to Augusta Health, as I know it is to all of you on the call today, and talk to you about our journey as it relates to patient experience. What I'd like to do on the next slide is give you just a little bit of background about Augusta Health, and I think sometimes it's always good to sort of understand what type of health system you're talking to and puts things in perspective as it relates to each one of us. So Augusta Health is one of 5 remaining freestanding community hospitals in Virginia. We're located in a beautiful corner of the Shenandoah Valley, right where Route 81 and 64 intersect in an area called Fishersville, Virginia. We serve a population of about 200,000, but we're kind of a semi-rural area. So Stanton, Augusta County, and Waynesboro is a population of about 120,000, and then there are another 80,000 lives that reside in the kind of secondary service area of counties that surround us. So that's a population of about 200,000. Augusta County, though, is a very large landmass, even though it's semi-rural. It's actually the size of the state of Rhode Island. So as a result, we have some pretty significant demographics and statistics. So for example, even though we're 255 beds with an average daily census of about 150, we have got a very busy emergency department to the tune of about 60,000 annual visits a year. Just to give you a little bit of a broader perspective, we've got 17 off-campus sites, 4 urgent cares, a convenient care center. We have hospice, home health, transitional care, palliative care. We have a fitness center. We have durable medical equipment. 70% of our revenue, we're about a $400 million net revenue system. 70% of our revenue is outpatient and 30% is inpatient. One of the things that we're really pleased about is the recognition, the external recognition that we've gotten for our clinical quality. And much like all of your health systems, we want to be a top decile performer across all of our 5 performance pillars. And clinical quality, of course, is right there as first and foremost. And so we've been very fortunate to have recognitions from Healthgrades, U.S. News and World Report, and also recognitions in other areas as well. So, for example, our financial strength and our performance. We're rated A1 with Moody's, and we're really, I think, the only health system of our size that has an A1 rating from Moody's. So if you go to the next slide, so I'm kind of boasting about our great performance, our top decile or quartile performance across our performance pillars, but the truth of the matter is therein the problem lies. Because while we really pride ourselves and drive ourselves to be top performers across all of our performance pillars, kind of the ugly truth of the matter is, as it related to the patient experience, we've really only been historically mediocre at best. We've not been bad in the realm of patient experience, but if you look at our top decile or quartile performance across the rest of our performance pillars, it just didn't stack up with our performance in patient experience, and it just wasn't consistent, and we were very, very aware of that. Right around 2018-2019 time period, we actually approved a new strategic plan called Journey 2025. And in that plan, we have a vision, and we've got 8 key strategies. And the top key strategy in our current strategic plan is to really drive an exceptional patient experience. And we looked at this plan as kind of our last chance card, if you will, to get this right. Because the truth of the matter is, for 10 years, we've been playing the game of Mother May I. 1 step forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And we just couldn't deliver that exceptional patient experience in a really consistent manner, which told me that we did not hardwire our culture to the degree that we needed to around this patient experience. And I know that we all have our analogies as it relates to patient experience. I happen to use the airline analogy a lot. We all expect when we travel on an airline that we're going to get from point A to point B without a calamity. We don't get off the plane and say, oh my God, thank God we didn't crash. Just like when a patient comes to our health systems, they expect to have high quality, safe patient care. But what are the things that impress us? What are the things that really, I think, create what I would consider to be preference or an impression, and that is, what was my experience? What kind of service did I experience? So in the airline industry, how easy was it to book that ticket? Or, how user-friendly was the system? Did they charge me to sit in my seat? Did I have to pay another fee to sit in the seat? Did I have to pay another fee to carry on a suitcase or check a suitcase? What kind of treatment did I get during the transit? Or if there was a problem or a snafu with a connection, what kind of service recovery did they offer me? These are the things that I think create what we call, sort of brand preference. And we all know that our brand is a promise. And in healthcare, that is the promise that we have to our patients. And I think we would also all agree that we're living in an unprecedented age of consumerism. The days of the doctor tells us to do something, so that's what we're going to do, are clearly over. There are tools, there are opportunities. Our patients and their families have choices, as they should. And so that raises the bar for all of us, and in my mind creates a challenge that, quite frankly, we decided that we were up for. At the same time all of this was going on, this sort of declaration that we're sucking wind a little bit in the patient experience department while we continue to do well across our other performance pillars. We're kicking off a new strategic plan. We were also recruiting for a new chief nurse exec. And I can remember when I met with the slate of candidates for our chief nurse exec candidates, Crystal Farmer really stood out to me. Crystal Farmer, we actually, sorry for the folks that are from HCA on the line, we stole her from HCA. One of the things that I really was impressed about Crystal is not only her insights into the professional practice of nursing, but her insights into quality, but her understanding of the link between the patient experience and leading cultural change. And Crystal had a very strong track record of success within the HCA organization as it related to the patient experience. And I felt like she was going to be really key to leading our organization in this strategic plan, this Journey 2025, where the patient experience was really the number one strategy that we were embarking on. So I'll turn it over to Crystal and kind of let her give you the lay of the land in terms of what it was that she saw when she first came to Augusta Health and the leadership that she brought to our organization as it relates to the patient experience.
Thank you, Mary. No pressure at all. I'm going to dive right into the data on the slide. You can see there are a few charts on there. But let's talk about it for a second. The first thing that I always look at before we develop any plan or any action plan for improvement is the response distribution, which would be that chart that's right in the middle of the slide. If I only looked at the percentile ranking, which is the slides on the, or the charts on the right side, I'd get pretty depressed and think that we'd have a really long road to go with a inpatient percentile ranking of around 39%. And the ER at 37%, which is why I go back to the inpatient response distribution. If I look at that, I found that we had very few 2s and 3s. We were really losing top box scores to 8s. And so with over 15% of the responses in 2018 falling to those 8s, we knew that we had some work to do, but that we weren't too far from the mark. So that made me feel a lot better. If you look at those rankings on the right, you can see that our largest area where improvement was needed was in communication, and that's very similar to most hospitals. And we all know that communication is a key driver in patient experience, but I would challenge you to think about communication as really the communication domain as the connection domain. This domain tells us how well we are connecting with our patients in a way that they feel cared about. And that sort of really describes what Mary described as she just said, the disconnect between our quality of care and the experience that our patients were having. Next slide. So I'm going to jump right into tactics. There were 5 areas that we put our focus on. We pushed hard on these areas. We also built accountability metrics into each one of these. We chose to start at our front door since the emergency room is the first impression and will influence the rest of their stay. We streamlined processes to reduce the wait times, and if there were patients waiting in our waiting room, we instituted rounding on those patients. Hiring for fit isn't new, but we doubled down on making sure that we hired team members with the skills and passion that align with our values. So in other words, no more warm bodies. And then back to basics really just means that we weren't going to reinvent the wheel. The focus was on nurse leader rounding, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, modeling what a great round looks like to our department leaders, and then communicating to our team not only our scores, but also what our goals are, and celebrating when we met those goals. Mary's going to talk about 4 and 5.
One other thing that Crystal brought in terms of our leadership, you see that uniform code there. one of the things, nobody wants to touch the dress code policy, right? It's just, one of those things that you're never going to please everybody, and everyone is always going to have a reason to complain about the dress code policy. But the truth of the matter is, one of my observations is that I really felt like there was a degradation in the appearance of we at Augusta Health in terms of professionals throughout our healthcare system. I was seeing a lot of polar fleece that had seen its day. Once in a while, actually, I'm embarrassed to tell you, it was more than once in a while, a hoodie would show up. Clothing that had writing on it that just really didn't create a professional impression. And I almost feel like I'm old-fashioned in bringing this up, but it was really something that I think was material and relevant, and creates not always the best first impression as it relates to our patients and families. And Crystal had the temerity to take that on. And this was something that she identified and felt like there was a great opportunity, and she did not address it as a punitive way. She addressed it as a professional pride opportunity. And that is exactly how she led the policy as it relates to creating a uniform dress code. So I noticed that she skipped over that because she probably didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. It wasn't the easiest initiative to lead, but she did an excellent job leading it. And when we talk about back to the basics, I just wanted to lift that up as being one of the basics. One of the things we have here at Augusta Health is this cultural sort of standard called the Augusta Way. And the Augusta Way is rooted in our values. And just like your healthcare systems, we've got values that we hold true, and we work very hard to pull those values into the forefront of our culture. We just don't want them to be platitudes on a poster and a wall that we can check and say, okay, we've got values. We work really hard to bring those values into the forefront of our culture. And so we took those values and we wrapped it up and we said, if there was one thing that we could do, that we could all behave in a certain way, what would that look like that we feel would really reflect our values of patient-centeredness, professionalism, excellence, and teamwork? And so one day, actually it was a 2-day period of time, we went off site with a whole group of people in our healthcare system. That included frontline folks, that included physicians, board members, patients, just a whole cross-section of the organization, and had a conversation around those values, and we came up with what we called Augusta Way. And I know this is going to sound maybe trite or very simple, but it's not always simple to pull off 365 days a year, but that was basically to build trust and peace of mind in our relationships with each other and in our relationships with patients and the families. And again, that was another thing that really energized our organization when we started this many years ago, but we felt as though it had plateaued. And we said, the Augusta Way is still the right thing to do. How can we re-energize it? How can we bring it back to life? How can we continue to nurture the Augusta Way to build the excitement that our whole workforce had about the Augusta Way when we implemented it several years ago? And so we had a little bit of an aha experience. Abraham and I were talking about our kids that are now college-age kids, but at the time my kids were in high school and they were both athletes, and it seems like every evening we were doing this drive-through at Chick-fil-A. And all of their friends were working at Chick-fil-A, and these were kids that I knew when they were in 3rd and 4th grade that were now young adults, 16, 17, 18, that would be waiting on us when we were driving through Chick-fil-A. And I was incredibly impressed at the way they internalized the Chick-fil-A service standards. They were incredibly genuine when they would take the order with a high level of initiative and interest and dynamic energy, the way that they would say, "my pleasure," when you thanked them. On game days here where we're located at the corner of 64 and 81, there's always a backup in traffic, and people are always getting off the exit and going to Chick-fil-A, and you see these long lines on game day, and you see all these young people out there with their iPads waiting on the people that are backed up in a very high energy, enthusiastic way. And I thought, how are these 16-year-olds pulling off this culture? If Chick-fil-A can do it, we should be able to do it with a group of professionals at Augusta Health. And so I researched what was the performance standard, what was the service standard, what was the education, what was the toolkit of Chick-fil-A in terms of building that culture, such that 16, 17, and 18-year-olds were leading it, and it was hardwired. And I found that they worked with the Ritz-Carlton in developing their infrastructure, their continuing education, their standards all around service. And it's not because they wanted to become a five-star hotel. That's not what Chick-fil-A is. Quite frankly, that's not what Augusta Health is. However, we all want the culture that the Ritz-Carlton has been able to hardwire, this incredible service-oriented culture. So to re-energize the Augusta Way, we actually started working with the Ritz-Carlton to help us sort of with that toolkit to hardwire our culture. And then the other thing that we did to kind of leverage and connect with the patient experience is motivation. And we have an employee success sharing program here that was quite frankly rooted in a Christmas bonus system. And we thought if we can take that bonus opportunity, that employee, and turn it into an employee success sharing program that links it to key performance indicators of Augusta Health, like patient experience, like a financial performance, we've got an opportunity to really kind of begin to connect the dots and operate on all cylinders. And so those were kind of two opportunities that were components of our culture that we thought if we can leverage the design of these two initiatives, we might be able to really accelerate our forward momentum. Next slide.
Thanks, Mary. So if you'll see the very center of the slide, big bold letters, I think nurse leader rounding, it says everything. We're trying to get leaders back at the bedside so they know what's happening on their units. Training is done by Crystal and myself because staff need to hear about the importance of this program from leadership. That's how we share the why. To illustrate the why, you have to have hard data. It's important to show how leader rounding actually impacts patient perception. The chart in the center shows the difference between patients answering yes or no to the question, did a nurse leader round on them during their visit? For patients answering yes, a clear increase is seen across each metric. If it was just one or two, you couldn't really say much, but when each metric saw an increase, just in that one question, nothing else changed. It's the same time period, same hospital, same docs, same nurses, but all of a sudden, pain is more well managed, communication is better, the hospital's cleaner, quieter, because someone took 5 minutes out of their day to sit with them and talk with them and treat them more than just a medical record number. They're a community member. Using a tool like mound rounding is so important, but it's not the magic pill. It's not going to make your scores go up. It's the practice, it's the accountability that comes with it. We use it as an accountability measure and an accountability tool. Okay. One area that nurse leader rounding, it can't be overlooked, is engaging and explaining to all staff that it's not just the leaders that need to know the why. When you do that, it has a ripple effect. Next slide.
Next slide. So I often get asked, is there a secret sauce? What is the secret sauce? And I've also been asked about nurse leader rounding. Is that the secret sauce that improves patient experience? And my answer would be yes and no. From this chart, you can see there's a huge correlation between nurse leader rounds, the number of rounds that we did, and our patient experience rating. And we had a huge increase in patient satisfaction and rounding when in the third quarter, beginning of the third quarter, end of the second quarter, we said every patient every day had to be rounded on, and we saw a huge improvement. But honestly, I think the real secret and the secret sauce is 1, 2, and 3. No matter what evidence-based tactic you implement, verifying, inspecting, and validating frequently is the must. You have to build in the accountability. Modeling the behavior, and in our case it was rounding, and sharing those stories from the rounding have kept patient experience in the forefront, and nurse leader rounding is not perceived as flavor of the month. Next slide.
Yeah, so the tree in the road, COVID-19. So 2020 started off for all of us in the Virginia Hospital Association as the year of the patient experience, and it kind of morphed into the year of the pandemic. And all of we health systems across the country, and of course here in Virginia, have had to transform. We've had to adapt, we've had to navigate uncharted waters, and we've all worked to find our new normal. At Augusta Health, we challenged ourselves as we were going down this COVID-19 path forward to not only do things like create safe surge capability to care for COVID-19 patients and keep our team members physically safe and to give them a sense of professional and personal well-being. But we didn't want to lose our strategic focus in the midst either. And so we challenged ourselves with COVID-19 not to lose our strategic focus as we moved forward with, as we all did, with finding our new normal and our paths forward in the midst of a pandemic. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, we've got a strategic plan, we've got a vision, we've got these 8 key strategies, the top one including patient experience, and we said, you know, we want to do a very strong job in serving our community and keeping that curve flat in our community, keeping our team members safe, promoting their personal well-being, and creating this very effective and safe surge COVID-19 care capability. But we also don't want to lose sight of our strategic focus as well. And so that was kind of the challenge that we put out for ourselves with COVID-19.
Thanks, Mary. Next, we go. So what did we do different? We took control over what we could during the uncontrollable. None of us could have planned that COVID-19 was going to happen this year. But, you know, I took it personal because I wanted to find a way to contribute and to continue to support our patients and staff during a time of uncertainty. Our goal of improving communication and patient experience could not fall by the wayside. Good communication was needed now more than ever. So what did we do? We continued rounding. This helped us monitor patient perception. We instituted a virtual sitter program, and it helped us remain present in rooms where we couldn't readily access, all in an attempt to keep communication alive. We kept patients connected and informed through a liaison program. Liaisons rounded daily to ensure patients and their families were connected. FaceTime appointments were made throughout the day to give patients the opportunity to see their loved ones during a time where visitation wasn't allowed. Meal cards were utilized to keep patients updated to policies that impacted them and their families. A community call center was established in the early days of COVID and fielded over 3,000 calls to date. We didn't want anyone to feel like they were in the dark. If we knew something, we wanted them to know something. So we also stepped up to make our staff feel safe and confident. We needed to take care of our staff so they could take care of our patients. We needed to be transparent, and we did this through frequent messages from Mary, bi-weekly town halls, and transparent communication. To help staff feel safe where they worked, we developed the Safety Resource Officer program. This was to help hardwire best practices and develop policies to keep us safe. It was important that our teams felt safe where they worked, caring for patients. If our staff felt safe where they worked, then patients felt safe receiving care from us. And, you know, as Q2 data finalizes, we see that our overall ratings for ED and inpatient were able to maintain above the Virginia average, which is due to all the hard work and dedication from every single team member. During a time where we needed heroes to step up, they definitely answered the call in a big way. Next slide.
So, you saw where we were in 2018, and then COVID happened in 2020. So where do we stand today? From 2018 today, if you start with our response distribution, we've moved the percentage of 8s to 9s and 10s. That light blue line on the top is 2020. Our ED percentile rank tells a very good story. Our overall rating and would recommend moved up 45 percentile ranking. And then our inpatient also improved in all areas. On a side note, Mary was just talking about our employee success sharing plan. We were able to pay out for the first time since 2014. At the end of 2019, we paid out that part of the employee success sharing plan. And so our staff have been very engaged in that pretty much before that, but also afterwards and getting recognized for that. I'd like for Matt to end with a patient story that happened during COVID. I think it really embodies what we tried to do during COVID, but also every single day.
So everyone knows that Patient Experience Week happened back in April. We had a lot of things planned, and, you know, of course, that kind of fell by the wayside, but we still wanted to find a way of saying thank you to our patients. So we developed a thank you note and worked hand in hand with Dietary to have these notes delivered at dinner time. During my daily rounds, most patients shared that they received the note and how they appreciated it. But one such patient went into greater detail about why it meant so much to her. The patient shared that she had a particularly rough time coming into the hospital. She elaborated that she remembered thinking that she was going to die. Before she knew it, she was in the ED, surrounded by what she called guardian angels. She became tearful, saying that she wouldn't be there talking with me right now if it wasn't for the amazing team at Augusta Health. She said the thank you note just put her over the top, likening it to a firefighter sending a thank you note for having the opportunity to put out a house fire. She shared that she would keep that simple note as a reminder of everything that had happened to her in her journey through Augusta Health.
Thank you, and we'd like to thank you, Abraham, and the VHHA for allowing us to share our story.
Mary, Crystal, and Matt, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you guys very much for taking the time out to put this together and share it with us. I think the use of data was very impressive. The way you've engaged your staff and also getting leadership to buy into the success sharing program. I think excellent example of sort of frontline to boardroom engagement in the patient experience, particularly with the strategic plan. So as I turn over to my colleague, Carrie Brady, if folks have any questions for the Augusta team, please chat them into the question box, and I can share those with the team before they leave. And Carrie, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Abraham. That was an amazing presentation, and as we have seen consistently, if you've been following us through the webinars, when we have these presentations, the experience really is grounded in all four of these essential foundations, and we see it consistently in the presentations that this is what comes across. We have a couple of quick questions for you today, because we always like to get a snapshot of what's going on in the state and to share that back with you. The first question is, are you validating the impact of specific processes or practices, like we just heard about nurse leader rounding, by comparing your HCAHPS data for patients who did and did not experience that process? That is a really great way to validate and also to demonstrate in your training why this is really important and why you need to do it. If you are doing it, and you'll have a chance to vote here, we encourage you, if you are doing this for some practices where you're taking a look at the data in this way, we'd love to know what you're looking at. And if you put that in the chat box, that would be fantastic. So, Abraham, are we getting responses? We're going to buzz through these.
We're getting wonderful responses. So I'm going to give them another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And excellent response. So I will close that and share the results.
Oh, this is fabulous. All right. So if 71% of you on the call are doing this, we definitely want to see in the chat box what you're doing this for, because it is a fantastic way to use your patient experience data that you have and to really demonstrate the impact. It is sometimes harder to see impact when you're just looking globally about, what's happening with our overall rating or what's happening over here, because it's affected by a lot of things. So that's fantastic, and we will be following up with you and giving more information about that. Our second question today is, have you implemented, since the onset of the pandemic, have you implemented new communication strategies to connect patients with their loved ones? And if you have, so Abraham, you're going to pull that up. If you have, again, we're going to ask you in the chat box to tell us what you've done so that we can then reach out to you and get some more information about that. One of the things about the pandemic is that this is new for everybody, of course. So working through the VHHA, you have this really rich opportunity to share how everyone is innovating at the front line and adapting to what you need to be doing. So we want to make sure that we're in a position to gather that information statewide and to share it so that everyone does not have to reinvent the wheel and is instead learning from the rapid improvements that are happening all around the state and the innovation. So we'll take a look and see how many of you have implemented these new communication strategies.
I'm going to go ahead and close.
There we go. We're closing that, so we'll see what that result is. 100% of you. Well, now, that is fantastic. So we are definitely looking forward to seeing in the chat what you're doing. And like I said, we'll be following up to get some more information about that because we'd like to share back some information. Our final question today is about new strategies to support staff. We just heard some of the things that Augusta Health was doing, and we want to know, same thing, if you've implemented these new communication strategies to support your staff. And if so, if you identify some of them in the chat, that would be great. The reason why, and I'm just going to speak, Abraham, about this next slide while we're getting the polling answers. The reason why we're asking all these questions is that everything is connected. One of the things that I want to pull out of what Augusta Health said is that these front doors are really important. We think of HCAHPS as your inpatient survey, but we know that patients are not differentiating between their inpatient experience and what their other experiences with the hospital or with your outpatient clinics, your urgent cares, any experience that they have with something that is involved with the hospital, they are considering that to be part of their experience. So it's really important to consider that. Okay, 93% of you have new strategies to support staff. So we have a lot of good information to gather from you. That's fantastic. And it really is, as I was trying to say, everything is connected. Your staff experience drives your patient experience. It's like this Mobius strip, which those of you who know what that is, it has one side. You think of it as a two-sided thing, but it just goes around. Everything is one side and links into everything else. And that's what really the patient experience, the staff experience, the front doors of your facility, in speaking of that in the broadest respect, but also seeing how somehow nurse leader rounding, as we just saw so powerfully in the data that Augusta Health shared, nurse leader rounding improves everything. It improves pain, it improves communication, it improves everything that's going on. So sometimes these really key strategies, if they're implemented well, as we've just heard, and they're sustainable, really make a difference across the board. So it helps to think about strategically think about how you're improving the patient experience from that perspective and making sure you're evaluating what tactics you're implementing are really working and give you the most value. So that was a really quick 3 polling questions. We're really interested to see the results, and thank you so much for sharing that information.
Excellent. Well, I've double-checked the question box, and I don't see any questions from the audience, and I suspect that's because the Augusta Health presentation was so thorough and comprehensive, and we also have contact information available if folks want to reach out to Crystal, Mary, and Matt. So Augusta team, thank you very much again for sharing your story with us. Any final comments from that team?
No, we just really appreciate the opportunity to share our story, and we're inspired by everybody's stories. And this is one of the great things about being part of the Virginia Hospital Association. We can learn from each other and work together and really accelerate our commitment to our patients. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you to your team there. Thanks to our colleague, Carrie Brady. And we ask that our audience, please plan to join us next month, August 27th at noon, where our colleagues from the VCU Health System here in Richmond will be sharing their patient experience journey with us. And then in September, the VHHA is facilitating a collaborative with Student Group in 5 Virginia hospitals, and we'll hear some insights from that effort on our September call. So thank you all very much again for being with us. Please take a few minutes to give us feedback on the survey, and hope you all enjoy the rest of July and early August, and looking forward to seeing you guys next month.